Namaste. So in the weeks leading up to the month of February, the Mother's Month, we thought that we would look at Sri Aurobindo's treatment of Satchit Ananda regarding her as Satchit Ananda Rupini, the 700th shloka in Sri Lalita Sahasranam. More importantly, for us, the composition of his great book, short though it be, The Mother. And we intend fully to spend the month of February in that small book. So we hope that you'll join us for that. But last week, we took the first term in Satchit Ananda, Sat, and we talked about the nature of being, as Sri Aurobindo expressed it in his chapter, The Pure Existent in the Life Divine. So I don't think that we'll exactly summarize. I don't think we'll exactly summarize everything that he says in this chapter. On Conscious Force, Chapter 10, beginning on page 87 in the Collected Works of Sri Aurobindo. But we'll take some of it up anyway. And as we often do, let's look at the first citation that appears. He calls them mottos, drawn from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, the first chapter, the third verse. Shvetashvatara, by the way, means one who owns a white horse or is the white-horsed one, referring to a powerful being who has achieved purity in consciousness. White always represents that. And as you know, it represents the principal color that we associate with the Divine Mother in Pondicherry. This verse reads, translated into English by Sri Aurobindo, they beheld the self-force of the Divine Being, Devatma Shakti, deep hidden by its own conscious modes of working. So, to set a little bit of context on that, this is a theistic Upanishad, one of the few which directly looks at a supreme person, capital P, who manifests the universe, who directs, controls, governs it. And this Upanishad has many features and similarities. To compare it to the Bhagavad Gita, which we've studied, of course, deeply. And the Gita seems even to draw from it. I would say from two, from Katha Upanishad and from this one, Shvetashvatara, most. This insight is central to Sri Aurobindo's thesis that the universe is not impersonal, the universe is not a vast of nothingness, of undefined, homogenized being which somehow is arranged by inconscient forces. No, to Sri Aurobindo, there is a power of the Supreme that creates and manifests the universe. The nature of nature is of the nature of the Supreme and is not different in essence. So, if you could imagine a being without walls, without borders, without temporality, does not exist in time, and yet somehow, within the scope of that infinity, its awareness, its intention is to manifest in a field which represents time, which represents figurines in space, which takes its own body of consciousness and multiplies it, this manifestation is no accident. This is a willed and deliberate act of the Supreme, who installs this universe within its own being. This would be encapsulation of Sri Aurobindo's position on this. This is like Plotinus in ancient Greece, following the Platonic tradition that spiritual reality at its height, at its epitome, is not motionless, is not impotent, is not stationary. It can be. In its essence, it never loses that immobility, but it moves. And its motion is intentional. The spirit, to Plotinus, loses nothing by acting creatively. Its force is not spent and lost, not ever to be recovered. Its reality in manifesting is not diminished. And the power of the spirit penetrates all the spiritual realm and also all the world of souls and each soul within the all soul. So Plotinus is speaking about a unified vision of, based, let me say, on his experience. He had on 2, perhaps 3 occasions at least, profound sessions within himself where he entered into the being of the divine. And his disciples who were around him, some of them present when this happened, were struck dumb at the power of what manifested within him. They could see it, they could feel it. They were themselves changed by Plotinus's experience. We know this is also true of Sri Ramakrishna, that his disciples would sit with their jaws down, gaping at Sri Ramakrishna as he entered into and returned from samadhi again and again. Sri Aurobindo was more impassive. One felt that greatness in him, but he didn't manifest it in a way that was dramatic or particularly showy. It wasn't his style. He held infinitudes within himself, which we might say is the mark of a truly vast and great being. It didn't make him dance, although I love dancing. So, all are one, essentially. Even when in manifestation, all remain one, as this Upanishad asserts. And this Upanishad states clearly actually, that the self-power, the Devatma Shakti, Deva, divine, godlike, Shakti, power, is hidden intentionally in its self-born qualities. Swagunair nigudham. Hidden inside those. All of these qualities sleep there. So this is the citation. The first words that we read as we open this chapter, which, by the way, was unrevised from its first publication on 15 May 1915. So, we regard, when we look out, a universe which is ever moving, never still. And yet, the Supreme is unmoving, except when it moves as and in the universe. if we remember the Isha Upanishad, and I don't have it with me, but it'd be worth if you give me just a second. I'm going to grab a copy of the Upanishad. All this drama so that I can read to you 2 verses from it. Verses 4 and 5. In English again from Sri Aurobindo. One unmoving that is swifter than mind, that the gods reach not, for it progresses ever in front. That, standing, passes beyond others as they run. In that, the master of life establishes the waters. So this is a reference to how the universe comes into being, and that the gods, mighty though they be, are always exceeded by this supreme, whether it's standing, sitting, whatever it might be. It is greater than, you might say, the demiurge that comes forth and thinks it manifests and controls the cosmos, whether he is Brahma or another. The 5th verse says, that moves, and that moves not. That is far, and the same is near. That is within all this, and that also is outside all this. It remains unique and supreme even while it indwells. So again, this is a philosophy that we're very familiar with as it appears in the Bhagavad Gita. And here we meet it again, but poised as consciousness. But when we look at the moving universe, we can see that it's a presentation of force because it's moving. It acts. Things occur within it. It's not static. So first, of course, with our senses, we encounter and embrace the physical in its elementary state first, later in subtler states, and its vibration is typified to us as the phenomenon of sound. And of course, when we hear that, we think of the tantric teaching of Shabda that begins the movement of the universe, even though this is an older teaching than what we have from the Tantra. But that is not the only form available in the presentation of force. There are others too. And so it will have to become aerial. It will have to become luminous, diffuse, and it must somehow cohere. So we see these 5 elements in Sanskrit, Pancha Bhuta, from ether to earth, all the way in the old philosophies. And these elements would be Prithvi, Ap, which is water. Prithvi is earth, Ap is water. Agni, fire, which you know, has to kindle and begin things. Vayu, wind, which blows things, manifests that. And then Akasha, ether. And they enumerate themselves in an upward arc. But the elements taken together don't necessarily deliver us to that which starts it all. We could, if we simply sat with the 5 elements, agree that perhaps only materialism is the answer to this. This all just occurs at the material level. We have no evidence to adduce that there was something beyond. Also, we could look at the dualism of Sankhya and be trapped in a way that the only spiritual possibility would be to regard the universe impersonally, not interact with the elements, and divorce ourselves from that, in which case, again, the universe loses. And none of this, of course, gives us the context of the divine being who originates all and carries it all within her or his own being. If that person is real, we have to find other answers beyond even the idea of a knowledge force, a desire force, an action force, stemming all of them from a supreme Adya Shakti, a supreme original power that starts them. Because that we don't have when we simply regard the universe at first. We have to dig deeper. But we can find in our experience, as we grow, as we evolve, as we deepen our self-look and our outlook, as our insight becomes sharper and more penetrating, we can perceive that there is a force inherent in existence, that we can get beyond the surface of force and find this conscious existence that we talked about last time, looking at Sri Aurobindo. So it isn't the how that really interests us now, because the how we understand to be a deliberate movement from within the infinite. We can't really grasp what that is because our consciousness is not yet infinite. But we can begin to become aware of our consciousness and recognize that we meet stages of consciousness in all forms of being, material and otherwise. So there's no derived aspect from a demiurge or anybody else that could compel an infinite being, Brahman, to come into being. It has to be self-willed. It has to be an intentional choice. So movement is there. Movement is real, but it is real within this stationed being which can be both static and dynamic. Not simply alternately, but truly both at one time. As when a yogi can be seated in a perfectly still consciousness, absolutely wrapped in peace, and yet continue to do work. Karma yoga flows out of that being. Meanwhile, inside, undisturbed, freedom, peace, even bliss. So, existence, Sri Aurobindo would conclude, must be conscious being. The inaction of the world, let me use that differently because inaction can mean a couple of different things. The activity of the world is a clue to consciousness that stirs the activity. It is behind what we see at the cusp of material expression. It isn't that it begins in matter. The impulse to act begins much more deeply, all the way back to that one conscious being. So Sri Aurobindo would establish that it is a conscious being empowered to act. That consciousness and power or force are coexistent. They are not two. They are one thing. Consciousness can restrain itself, can retire, can get up and do something. You can go to sleep, your consciousness continues. You get up, you go to work, your consciousness is active. Both are real states. In a completely conscious being, Both the sleep and the action occur within the realm of a single being. There is no demarcation. There is no division between the two. It's the brand of current consciousness that says whether it's sleep, dream, or waking activity. So, the relationship between force and consciousness is profound, and that is key. Consciousness here is not the fitful stream available to mentating humanity. It's not that. It is a pulse of a powerful chit. There is a greater consciousness around, within, above, which stems from a central chit shakti, a conscious power. It is not produced by the brain or its chemical activities, and we should be able to experience within ourselves in our yogic explorations that our brain is, in a sense, comparable to a workshop device. It's an instrument. A workshop device doesn't produce the electricity that drives it. It receives from the electricity. It doesn't originate it. We are conscious, but we're only aware of the narrow band of which we're conscious. Most of that is in a mental sphere, not even the higher part of the mind, not even the lower part of the mind, but just one little band. But we are conscious, but also superconscious. We are also subliminally conscious. We are connected profoundly, inextricably with the universal consciousness. That which we think is largely thought for us by the universal mind. But mind is only one brand, one range, one plane of conscious being. As we know, there are several. Let's experiment. Let's experience directly and analyze the ranges of awareness from the material beyond the ordinary mental as manifest realms of some conscious force. We will find ultimately in our experience that they are unified in a general chit shakti, if you will. And all other forms of awareness and being and power cohere in it, capital I-T. So the consciousness of the gods and the goddesses who never wink, the consciousness of the sages, of the rishis, of the people of the earth, of the squirrel and the turtle and everything, they're all forms of a complete consciousness evolving in manifestation, which is a tiny thread of what consciousness with a capital C actually is. Unimaginable to the human mind, but identifiable, because once we know what we are essentially, we can live in that and feel and become widened and more aware. So, there is this unity in Chit Shakti, and all other forms of awareness, as I said, live inside that. So, if the consciousness of one realm, the vital realm, the mental realm, is truly united in others also, then so are the planes of being. They are each invested in the other. None of them are really absent from any of them, although we speak of them as if they're layers of a grand cake, which the divine enjoys tasting. But they are shaped by one conscious force of existence, as Sri Aurobindo would call it. When we peer into the operations of inanimate nature, we find the same hidden intelligence everywhere that exists above in suprarational planes. Because the suprarational is not really absent. It has been undiscovered, and being undiscovered has not been evolved here. The difference between the higher triplicity, Satchit Ananda, and the lower triplicity, matter, life, and mind, is the illusion of separation, which is the mind's conceit. Sri Aurobindo writes, and you can find this on page 97, for the force that builds the worlds is a conscious force. The existence which manifests itself in them is conscious being. And a perfect emergence of its potentialities in form is the sole object which we can rationally conceive for its manifestation of this world of forms. Let's look at his own developing yogic experience to understand his viewpoint. Chit Shakti is a term that he uses frequently in the Life Divine. But there's another term that he used very frequently in his record of yoga, as we call it. It's Chidghana. Chidghana means massed chit. So a force of consciousness that expresses something of the primordial nature of awareness in its pure state. So as if consciousness compressed itself down through an act of tapasya, an energizing that compressed, concentrated, and got it absolutely white hot, all in a single space, very small. That is a range of consciousness Sri Aurobindo was exploring shortly after he came to Pondicherry. Say by 1912, he's writing about this. A dense, luminous consciousness, the seed state of the divine consciousness, something powerfully concentrated. This was not a single experience. It was combined with other aspects of the divine nature. So it was liberating, joyful, enlarging. And this was true from 1912 on. We can see a pattern of growth all the way up to as he approaches the end of the composition of the aria. He says that it if I could paraphrase, the varying play of consciousness as a sport based upon this immovable reality, founded on that immovable reality, and delight was occasioned with each motion within that. So he writes rati, the rati in all things of the prema, ahaituka, chidghana, anandas is established. He's describing something getting permanently realized in him. Describing a causeless ahaituka, a general bliss grounded in this dense conscious being. Rati, by the way, is the lowest measure of pleasure and delight. So he was getting this established in him first and then climbing to higher grades. Shuddha Ananda, the pure Ananda, was moving higher and higher as well, was blended into this, fortifying and solidifying the upward curve of his development. So the affective, the empowerment, not only the entranced condition was becoming available to him in normal life, but even in dream, apart from daily experimentation and practice, he was preparing for entry into the highest states beyond the walls of this cosmos, and he was moving into an objectless, massed, conscious delight. It's worth noting, too, that achieving a general spiritual state wasn't enough for the being who was leading his sadhana forth. Whatever Sri Aurobindo might have been willing, this person with a capital P was in a way enabling his progress, inviting him for further advance, pointing out the lacunae where he had not finished his work, had to go back. Sri Aurobindo took meticulous care to note everything about these experiments in yoga in this journal that he kept. So delight was, in a sense, being poured into this waiting vessel or ocean of consciousness. He had achieved liberation, if that's what we want to call it, in 1908, expanded upon it by 1910, earlier even. But he made dynamic each interior victory. There were, of course, obstructions. There were, of course, reversals. But one can see the thrust of his sadhana, of his ascent, and the sincerity of his effort. By 1917, he is finding stability throughout his being, even in the human representation of this conscious power. So one thing it was to achieve it on inner spheres, in that august inner being that he had become, but he was manifesting it, you see, in his human personality as well. So, 1917, the year that Kapali Shastriya meets him, the year I believe that Purani meets him, maybe a little later, this work continues to grow in him. And when they come back and see him a few years later, Sri Aurobindo is vastly different in his physical persona. He is golden. He is vast. He has become light-complected. I don't know what the advantage of that is, but Okay. Simply, I guess, that we can say that it is the goldening of his being. So, we find that his philosophy, articulated in the various chapters of the Life Divine, trace out in grand theory what was his actual practice. Because he realized it, he could write about it. And he could write about it in ways that move us and invite us to similar expeditions of consciousness. So I think we can turn now to Savitri and read a page or so from that, and we're going to go back to where we left off last time. Virtually, I may skip a sentence, but we're going to start in Book 2, the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds, Canto 15, The Kingdoms of the Greater Knowledge, on page 298. Thence gazing with an immeasurable outlook, one with self's inlook into its own pure vasts, he saw the splendor of the Spirit's realms, the greatness and wonder of its boundless works, the power and passion leaping from its calm, the rapture of its movement and its rest, and its fire-sweet miracle of transcendent life, the million-pointing undivided grasp of its vision of one same stupendous all, its inexhaustible acts in a timeless time, a space that is its own infinity. A glorious multiple of one radiant self, answering to joy with joy, to love with love. All there were moving mansions of God bliss. Eternal and unique, they lived the one. There, forces are great outbursts of God's truth, and objects are its pure spiritual shapes. Spirit no more is hid from its own view. All sentience is a sea of happiness, and all creation is an act of light. Out of the neutral silence of his soul, he passed to its fields of puissance and of calm, and saw the powers that stand above the world, traversed the realms of the supreme idea, and sought the summit of created things and the almighty source of cosmic change. There knowledge called him to her mystic peaks, where thought is held in a vast internal sense, and feeling swims across a sea of peace, and vision climbs beyond the reach of time. An equal of the first Creator seers, accompanied by an all-revealing light, he moved through regions of transcendent truth, inward, immense, innumerably one. Their distance was his own huge spirit's extent. Delivered from the fictions of the mind, time's triple dividing step baffled no more. Its inevitable and continuous stream, the long flow of its manifesting course, was held in Spirit's single, wide regard. Well, next week we get to play in the fields of Ananda. I don't know if we get to summarize 2 chapters. The delight of existence, the problem, the delight of existence, the solution, all at once, but we'll try, we'll do something, and then the following Sunday, into the mother we go. So, I hope you're happy, I hope you're aware, and I'm sure you really are. So, much love to you. Stay well. Namaste. Jai Ma.
Namaste.